General Laws and Technology Committee is called to order now. Can we have a roll call?
Senator Ruff. Senator Locke. Senator Vogel. Senator Eben. Here. Senator Reeves. Senator McPike. Senator Donovan. Senator Mason. Senator Boysko. Senator Stewart. Senator Pillion. Senator Bell. Here. Senator Hashmi. Senator Kiggins.
Here.
Senator Barker. Mr. Chair, I have a quorum.
All right, everybody, we have a quorum. There were, as of yesterday, there were 12 bills that have been sent to the General Laws and Technology Committee. I figured, given all the committees and put on the docket, only 4 bills that really deal with 3 issues related, and all of those issues relate to evictions, which is a major issue that we're dealing with right now in Virginia, and it is significantly relevant to the actions that we can take as the General Laws and Technology Committee today. What I also figured was that I would have someone from the administration basically present what they've been doing as it relates to evictions and some of the options that are there and what they are proposing for us moving forward, including with language in the budget and monies that will help address some of the issues related to evictions. It's clearly a significant issue across the Commonwealth, and I think it's important that we take this seriously and try to figure out what we can do to provide protections for both the landlords and the tenants that are affected by where we are right now. Right now, what we have, the person we have speaking for the administration is Angela Navarro, and if we could bring her online and let her be able to tell us what they've been doing as it relates to the eviction issue and where they are right now on things, what's been proposed, what actions has already been taken, and what's being proposed in the budget and elsewhere right now. Can we get Angela Navarro on the screen?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I hope you all can hear me. Senator Barker, as you mentioned, the governor's office has been doing quite a bit as it relates to eviction. So thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments today. At the outset, I will note that the Commonwealth, as we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, we recognize that a key factor is ensuring that all Virginians have access to safe and secure housing. And that has been something that we've worked on with our agencies, as well as in our conversations with the Supreme Court of Virginia. So as you know, the current Supreme Court moratorium on issuing writs of eviction is in place through September 7th. And that moratorium is in place because the governor submitted a letter to the Supreme Court requesting the extension of that moratorium as we continue to develop and implement programs to address the ongoing crisis around evictions. But it's certainly clear that legislative solutions are needed to address the ongoing economic uncertainty that both tenants and landlords are facing right now. We are trying to address in a holistic manner that recognizes and balances the needs of tenants to remain safely in their homes, while also attempting to avoid significant impacts to the rental market. And we set forth this comprehensive strategy through an amendment to the budget. So I'd like to just give a brief overview of that and then talk a little bit about ongoing stakeholder engagement around the bills that are in committee today. So the budget amendment would require landlords and tenants to work together to enter into a payment plan and to utilize the federal, state, and local rental and mortgage assistance funds, such as our rent and mortgage relief program that the Department of Housing and Community Development is administering. These funding mechanisms, we believe, will help to provide stability for the rental market. Those funds are available to assist households that are facing economic uncertainty as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. And if the landlord fails to offer a payment plan and to work with the tenant to seek rental assistance, including through those programs, then evictions are halted until April 30th of 2021 under the language. We are certainly engaged in ongoing conversations, both with members and with stakeholders on this budget language, and we certainly look forward to continuing those conversations as the discussions occur over the next few days. And then, of course, a number of bills that are in committee today touch on aspects of these principles, the important issues around evictions. And we certainly look forward to continuing to work with both the bill patrons and the stakeholders over the coming days on those bills as well. I know that there is movement, there are amendments, and we're still looking at those and evaluating each of those bills as they come before us. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, are there any questions that anyone wants to address to Ms. Navarro? Senator Evan.
Yeah, I don't know if I heard the number, but some of the groups that are advocating for tenants are advocating for very, very large numbers of as much as $1 billion in need they're claiming. And I was just wondering, what is the need that you see, and do you think we're waiting for, is it all contingent on what the federal government gives us, or how much of it are we going to be able to fund?
Senator Evan, thank you for that question. The governor has provided an initial allocation of $50 million to the rent and mortgage relief program. We are still working through that initial allocation. The governor certainly has articulated that if more funds from our CRF funds are necessary, that they could be available, obviously depending on other needs that the administration is balancing. But at the same time, to your point, we have made a request of our federal delegation for a total nationwide allocation of $100 billion for rent and mortgage relief. And I know that there are ongoing conversations in DC about the ability to fund the program at that level.
All right, are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Bell.
Mr. Chairman, quick question. This is semi-related, but I'm wondering if you could speak about response times and if you're adequately staffed to meet the demand, given I know that the demand has been quite heavy in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Bell. So the way that the Department of Housing and Community Development stood up the rent and mortgage relief program is that we are working through nearly 36 local partners to deploy those funds to landlords on behalf of households. Those partners are partners that administer a number of housing programs, both with state dollars and federal dollars. So these are programs that and partners that we work with very comprehensively. At the same time, as you can imagine, the strain on these programs has been significant. There are many households that need assistance. So we are working with those program partners to increase capacity, to hire more staff to process those applications. Right now, what we're seeing is the processing of applications is taking between 5 and 14 days to process. And of course, that's when all of the information is provided. So oftentimes our partners have to work with the landlords and the tenants to get the appropriate information in the application. So we do recognize that turnaround time needs to be improved. And that is certainly something that the agency is working with our partners on. We have provided funding to the partners to increase capacity.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, is there someone who spoke?
Mr. Chair, over here. Boysko.
Oh, Boysko, Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one additional question. I know you've talked about the federal funding that we're hoping would come that could cover the cost of such a program as is being offered here. What assurances are we going to have while we're making decisions about this piece of policy that we're going to get the money? Or is there a way that we can tie the receipt of the funding to the enactment of the policy?
Senator Boysko, thank you for that question. We certainly recognize that the needs are much broader. Obviously, the CRF funding is available to those individuals who have faced direct economic harm during the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also recognize that individuals who aren't eligible because they faced economic situations prior to COVID-19 are not able to get access to these funds. And so that is something that we've talked to the congressional delegation about, the broader need, and certainly the need beyond December 31st when the CRF funds expire. But I will also say that the initial $50 million allocation that the governor has provided from those CARES Act funds has not been fully utilized. So we have not seen at this point that the needs have extended beyond the funding that is currently available.
All right, are there any other?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Mason.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, I'm interested in how the moratorium works with the payment plan. I've read Senator Evans' bill, and if you go through the payment plan and then you default, then it seems you're subject to eviction. But would the moratorium on evictions trump that? And if, could you speak to that, please, ma'am?
Senator Mason, thank you for that question. We may need to have council address some of the considerations about what provisions in the legislation might apply or address what the budget language does. I can speak specifically to the budget language itself, but there might be additional considerations around the bills that you'll be hearing in the committee today. So what the budget language says is landlords and tenants need to work together on both a payment plan and seeking additional rental assistance via the federal, state, and local programs that are available to them. If a landlord does not do so, then they cannot evict their tenant until April 30th of 2021. That is how the language is drafted. So it's essentially landlords cannot take that action if they are not willing to work with their tenants on both the payment plan and seeking rental assistance.
Are there any other questions? All right, and just to make sure everybody understands clearly, unless there's an emergency clause on any of the bills, none of the bills would take effect until another 4 months lapses, so it'd be into 2021. So that's why it's important to have language that is in the budget to be able to implement the things there and have that be consistent with what we do as it relates to the bills that are on the table today. So, all right, are there any further questions that anyone has? All right, here's what we're going to do. We have 4 bills. They deal with 3 topics. The 3 topics are: 1, the moratorium, and that is Senator Hashmi's bill, which is 5051, deals with the moratorium issue. There are 2 bills that deal with the payment plan, and those bills are Senator Evans and Senator Bell's, 5086 and 5088, and they've worked together so that we will basically have the 2 of them combined there if we move forward on those. And I think they've taken pieces of both of their bills to be able to address that. And then finally, Senate Bill 5089, which is Senator Locke's bill. And that deals with some of the motels, for example, that have been transitioning to, at least for some people, becoming a permanent residence for those individuals there, and how that we would deal with the issues as it relates to those. So those are the 3 categories of bills. I'm going to start with Senator Hashmi's to have her basically just very briefly summarize things. She has a substitute. Right now that substitute is not technically available to us. She will move the substitute, and once the substitute's been adopted, it will be online so everybody can go online and look at it, and then I will suspend consideration of that one so that everybody has time to read the substitute. I will move to the Senator Bell and Senator Evans' bills on the payment plan. I think there's much more general consensus in terms of how to deal with that issue. And we'll deal with those bills and then come back to Senator Hashmi's and then move on to Senator Locke's. So Senator Hashmi, can you just give us the introduction to yours and then make the motion for the substitute that you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I want to introduce Senate Bill 5051. This is an eviction moratorium, and we do have a substitute, and I move the substitute.
All right, there's a motion and a second to adopt the substitute. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The substitute is adopted. And with that, now the legislative services can put that online so everybody can take a look at what's entailed, incorporated within the substitute, which does have some changes, significant changes from what the original Senate Bill 5051 had. And with that, I will then now suspend consideration and discussion on that bill and move to the payment plan bills, which Senator Evan and Senator Bell have. Senator Evan, you want to take the lead in presenting on those?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, on Senate Bill 5088, the payment plan bill, I would move the amendment in the nature of a substitute, that it could be put online.
Is there a second for that? Second. All right. All in favor of adopting the substitute, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, that substitute is before us then.
Okay, and then I think, I don't know if Senator Bell has a motion if we were going to roll ours together now at this point.
Yeah, Senator Bell, you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I've worked a great deal, hopefully you can hear me, with Senator Evan on this and stakeholders. I appreciate the cooperation from everyone. I asked that my bill be incorporated into his bill and that we move forward with one vehicle.
All right, and so that you'll be co-patrons on that bill then.
So I will make that in the form of a motion.
All right, is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor of rolling the two bills together as Senator Bell's bill being rolled into Senator Evans' bill? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, those are rolled together. Proceed, Senator Evans.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what this bill does is it requires that that during a state of emergency declared by the governor, it allows the governor to allow for payment plans to be established in the event of a tenant missing a rental payment. The landlord would be required to offer a payment plan to the tenant to tell them that you are eligible to be evicted or to enter into a payment plan. In order to enter into a payment plan, the tenant would have to sign a statement that they were had lost income or had unexpected expenses in the event of the state of emergency, and that they would be required to pay back the missed rent in equal payments over 6 months or to the end of the lease term, whichever is sooner, meaning that you couldn't extend it beyond the term of your lease, otherwise there'd be no leverage. They could pay it off in full at any point if funds become available. The bill applies to landlords who have more than 4 units or more than a 10% financial stake in 4 properties, so the smallest of landlords it would not apply to. They would only be required to offer such a payment plan for one missed rental payment over the term of a lease, not more than one. And it does not preclude tenants from receiving other relief to make rent payments. The bill waives late fees on the rental payments while the plan is being paid off. And it's the product of stakeholder meetings where we built close to a consensus policy with a number of people who I think will speak for themselves in testifying. But it's important to know the point that we're at, the crisis point that we're at. Even before the recession caused by COVID-19, 78% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, and only 26% of residents in Class C properties, which is made up of affordable housing units and frontline workers, were able to make partial or full payments in June of this year. And if we zoom into Virginia, we had, as of June 29th, 12,000 eviction cases pending in Virginia's general district courts. And those numbers will rise dramatically at the end of the statewide moratorium in September. And the number that was most just amazing to me is that by November 30th, there's an estimate that there could be as many as 259,000 eviction cases pending from the Stout Eviction Center comes up with that estimate. That would be 780,000 Virginians who could become homeless. So this bill's really a win-win because an eviction costs a property owner between turnover costs, lost rent, court, legal fees, as much as $3,500. And of course, to be evicted, a family can lose most or all of their possessions, job loss, mental illness, lifelong poverty. It can lead to a lot of bad things, bad credit, et cetera. So with that, that's the bill. I know there were some people who may have signed up to testify.
Senator Bell, you want to add anything to what Senator Eben presented?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just add that I think this bill is a reflection of cooperation from many different stakeholder groups. And the thing that I think is particularly noteworthy is the business community and landlords, the Renters Association, all were participants, the realtors. So people on both sides really wanted to work together to try to come up with a solution that would be good for people, keep them in their homes, and also to really find a pathway to success as we get through this pandemic. So I applaud everybody for working together on this and coming up with a really, I think, a win-win solution. It's harder to do that, but it's so worthwhile when it's done. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Are there questions or comments from other committee members? If not, we will move to public testimony. I think that what's certainly been expressed has been collaboration and of stakeholders as well as legislators who've worked on sort of finding a middle ground and being able to address these issues broadly. What I'll do is to try to give each side about 10 minutes to present their case on this issue. This is just specifically for the Senator Bell and Senator Evans payment plan bill. It's not dealing with the moratorium or with the motel issues there. First person I have here is R.L. Dunn. This would be specific to just the payment plan bill.
He's no longer on.
He's not on. All right. Tyler Craddock.
Tyler, if you could unmute.
Yep.
He's not on either. Okay. Aaron Barton. Oh, he's on. Okay. Tyler Craddock.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Tyler Craddock, representing Manufactured Housing Communities of Virginia. As was presented by Senator Eben, he and the House patron of this legislation brought a number of key stakeholders in early on it. We appreciate the opportunity to work with him, and then Senator Bell came forward and commend their work to you, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. Aaron Barton.
Aaron, if you could unmute.
Not on either. Okay. Elena Ferranti.
Aaron's on.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay there to a speaker, so I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We have worked very closely with Senator Eben on this bill. We really appreciate all the time he has taken to work with us and listen to all of our thoughts on the bill, and we do support the bill as written.
All right. Thank you. Luis Aguilar.
Luis, you're on. If you can unmute your mic.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, please speak.
Good afternoon. I'm Luis Aguilar, Casa Virginia Director, and today I speak on behalf of our 10,000 members. We support the efforts by Senator Eben, and we support his bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Johnson.
They've dropped, Senator. Elena Ferrante is on. You can unmute.
Good afternoon. My name is Elena Ferranti. I'm a owner in Colonial Heights area. I just wanted to express my appreciation for moving to the bill that had broad spectrum support, and I wanted to support this bill and let you know why the apartment industry, and me specifically as an owner, was able to support it. It's because this is something that 90% of us are already doing. So I just want to say thanks again for working with the industry. We're here to help.
All right, thank you. Joshua Johnson.
Not in the room, Senator.
What was that?
They are not in the room anymore.
Not on, all right. Chip Dix.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Chip Dix. I can associate my remarks with Aaron Barton's remarks from the Realtors and also echo those remarks on behalf of the Northern Virginia Apartment Association. Thank you.
All right. Brian Gordon.
Am I on? Hello, am I on?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Just very quickly, Brian Gordon on behalf of the Virginia Apartment and Management Association and the Apartment and Office Building Association. Want to give thanks to Senators Bell and Eben for working with us on this. I think we've reached a good compromise, as you already heard from Ms. Ferranti. This is an industry best practice that a lot of people have been already offering to try to help tenants during these very extenuating circumstances, and so we are happy to support the bill. Thank you.
All right. Renee Pulliam.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I had intended to come on and speak in support of 5086 and in opposition of 5088. Quite honestly, the amendment I am trying to find online and I don't see it up. So I will have to defer and echo the comments that Brian Gordon just made. Our industry certainly supports residents in entering into payment plans. We want to do so in every way possible in order to preserve housing, but also to provide opportunities for landlords to recoup their financial obligations or their financial commitments as obligated in the lease contracts. So I do support the amendment.
Thank you. Kevin Shiflett.
Kevin Shiflett's on.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. My comments are actually for the moratorium bill, so I'll hold my comments until then. Thank you.
All right. Vince Ferranti.
They're not on the line, Senator, but
All
we
right.
do have one.
Amy Groover.
Who is he at? Amy's in the room.
All right.
Please unmute, Amy.
I apologize, but I did not intend to speak. I guess I checked the wrong thing.
Okay.
So I apologize.
That's quite all right. No problem. All right. That's the public testimony. We took a little over 7 minutes on that. So that we now have heard the public testimony on these bills. Is there a motion to be made?
Move to report.
Second.
We have a motion to report the Senate Bill 5088, which incorporates 5086. Any further discussion on that? All right, can you call the roll for the vote on the bill to report?
Senator Ruff. Senator Locke. Senator Vogel. Senator Eben. Senator Reeves. Senator McPike. Senator Donovan. Senator Mason. Senator Boysko.
Aye.
Senator Stewart. Senator Pillion. Senator Bell.
Aye.
Senator Hashmi. Senator Kiggins.
Aye.
Senator Barker.
Aye.
Ayes 14, no 0.
Ayes 14, no 0. That bill passes. So at this point, we will go back to Senate Bill 5051, Senator Hashmi's bill. I don't know whether have people been able to access the substitute online?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Shall I go ahead and present?
Yeah, go ahead and present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at the substitute as presented through DLS. This substitute is very much in alignment with the governor's budget language that you just heard from Secretary Navarro. It is an attempt to put into place the moratorium, but also to support the rent and mortgage relief plan that is available so that tenants and landlords both are protected in the process through the crisis that we have. In a lot of ways, you might consider this particular moratorium also to be enabling language for the payment plan that Senators Eben and Bell just presented. It is language that asks the landlords to deliberately work with their tenant to achieve a payment option so that they can have a good resolution for both sides. It enables those tenants that are unable to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, to get the relief that they need from the landlords. So if you've taken a look at the language, you see that it is in alignment with, in good measure, with the governor's proposed budget, and also supports the payment plan as just discussed by Senators Bell and Eben. I know a lot of people have been concerned with the prospect of an eviction moratorium, and I acknowledge that it is unprecedented, but we are living in unprecedented times. Unemployment rate was close to 12% in April in Virginia, and while the unemployment numbers are improving, we are still in a state of crisis. And according to the RVA Eviction Lab, close to 300,000 households are right now facing the reality of homelessness. And among these households, there are 130,000 households with children. This morning in the Committee on Education and Health, we heard many people here express passionate concern for the educational opportunities of children and the lack of equitable access for thousands of Virginia's children. These issues and concerns around education pale in comparison when we consider the significant trauma of homelessness. What's the benefit of having a laptop if you don't even have an electric outlet to plug it in? The Commonwealth has had a long history of crisis of eviction. Among the top 10 cities with the highest eviction rates in the United States, Virginia has 5 cities. And so the Commonwealth has the dubious honor of holding 50% of the top cities with an eviction crisis. This pandemic has simply exacerbated our ongoing eviction crisis, putting tens of thousands of families at risk for homelessness. Some have described it as a tsunami that's coming our way. These families are more than likely to come from communities of color. These families represent our essential workers. We call them essential, but they are carrying the burden of this crisis on their backs, keeping families safe, keeping families in stable housing, is absolutely essential, and I urge the committee members to support this moratorium. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, are there questions of Senator Hashmi or comments that committee members want to make at this time?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the patron. How do we have assurance that we're going to have the funding to make the landlords whole so that they're not left without resources? Could you help explain that? I still am not getting that.
If I heard your question, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I heard Senator Boysko's question correctly, it is how do we ensure that the landlords are kept whole? As Secretary Navarro shared, there is $50 million in the rent and mortgage relief program that we have not currently spent, and this moratorium, along with the payment plan bill, will encourage and help landlords and families to access that money that is still there. And we are also hoping that more federal dollars will come in. Research has shown us that landlords actually fare much better financially by participating in the governor's rent and mortgage relief program than by evicting tenants that haven't paid. Every eviction costs the landlord an estimated $2,000 to $3,000 in lost rental income, court cost, and attorney's fees. And through the rent relief program, landlords can receive up to 2 full months of past due rent and the full amount of future rent as it becomes due. So instead of losing $2,000 through an eviction, the landlord could receive the full payment and future payments as well. So this is actually a program that would be quite beneficial to many of our landlords.
All right, are there other questions or comments from members of the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Mason.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hashmi, on line 19, the landlord has taken all steps necessary to apply for any financial assistance available through the program. So based on what Secretary Navarro told us, it seems that I guess the landlord can apply for that in the state program. Senator Boysko is asking if we know the federal money is going to be available, but do we know whether the landlord can apply for that money themselves as the program exists today?
It is my understanding, Mr. Chairman, Senator Mason, it's my understanding that the landlords can apply for that relief directly.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Mason.
So this probably isn't fair to the patron because Secretary Navarro said that we probably need advice of counsel, but what is your understanding if the bill we just passed, you offer a payment plan, you sign up for a payment plan, you pay 1 month, you get month 2, and you can't make the payment? Would Senator Eben and Bell's bill allow the landlord to move towards eviction, or would your bill then kick in and the landlord would have to then take steps to apply financial assistance and be unable to evict the tenant in that situation?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Mason, in that situation, the landlord has that option to continue to apply for the rent and relief program. So if the payment plan that's in place is no longer tenable for the tenant, and the tenant is not able to pay, let's say, 60% of the cost, whatever the payment plan might be, the landlord then would be eligible to get full rent through the rent and relief program, but would go through that application process again.
So last one, Mr. Chairman. So, but
Senator Mason,
based on your understanding of the bill, they would then be required to do so.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Mason, that's my understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Ashby.
all right, are there any other questions? Senator Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question I've got really for patron and maybe for council as well. On line 31, the tenant has willfully, the word willfully. I'm a little concerned about that because it seems to raise a bar pretty high. The other parts of this bill put the responsibility on the landlord, but I'm concerned about, again, with our bill on the payment plan that we just did, what would the bar be for willfully and why was that word chosen?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Bell, I think council would probably be best able to answer that question.
Is there anyone related to staff that could answer that question?
Brooks, we can't hear you right now.
Brooks?
No, we can't hear you.
Unmute yourself if you can.
We can't.
Brooks, we might need you to go out and go back into the meeting if you could.
Mr. Chairman, in lieu of time, if you want to come back to that one, I would suggest maybe we could do that.
All right. Are there other questions from committee members, the patron?
I just have a comment.
Yes, Senator Eben.
I just want to be clear that this bill, there are four, I don't know what you want to call them, sub-clauses, that it's not that no one's going to be evicted. They can't be evicted unless the landlord's notified the tenant in writing on line 15, unless they've tried to get the financial assistance on line 19, all steps available, unless the tenant won't try and get into a payment plan. So I think this dovetails with the other bill well. And the bill that we had passed earlier, Senate Bill 5088, benefits people who in many cases won't qualify for rent relief. This is a bit broader for people who may not have the same means.
All right. Thank you for that observation. Are there other questions or comments?
Staff is back on, Senator.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Bell.
Again, I would hold off on the until we maybe we have the answer to willful right now. I saw him back on the TV there. My other question was, can the landlord apply for this assistance? Because my understanding was that the tenant or renter was the one that could apply. I wasn't sure the landlord could. Do you have clarification on that?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Bell, it's my understanding that the landlord can apply and actually ought to be the one to apply the payment from the rent and mortgage relief program would be going directly to the landlord.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
That's consistent with my understanding that the landlord would be the one to apply for this assistance because the payment would be going directly to the landlord to cover a portion of the rent that the tenant owes. Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have another question. It's probably for council. I have an understanding, although I'm not seeing it in the bill here, that the rent relief program specifically requires that landlords waive half of the tenant's back rent. Is that accurate? So they would only, even if they were to apply, they would only be getting half of what the tenant's normal rent would be. Is that accurate? And I guess council might be the best person to ask unless the patron has the answer.
Senator Hashmi, do you have a response on that?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Boysko, I'm sorry, with your mask, were you saying they would only receive half? Is that what your question was?
Mr. Chairman, yes. So taking my mask off, my understanding is the rent relief program specifically requires that the landlord waive half of the tenant's back owed rent. And I'm wondering if that's accurate?
So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Boysko, it is my understanding that through the rent and mortgage relief program, landlords can receive up to 2 full months of past due rent and the full amount of future rent as it becomes due.
All right. Are there any other questions that anyone has?
Mr. Chairman, I did see counsel pop up on the screen a moment ago. I don't know if he could jump in now or not.
All right. Are we able to get staff on the screen?
It looks like there's no audio for him. Sorry, Senator.
You may need to call in.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sure. Ah.
There you are.
Am I coming? Excellent. Hi. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with regard to willfully, that would mean that the tenant would have to take some action in order for them to be evicted later on. So if the landlord, say, posted a notice, but the tenant never got the notice, or the tenant never got the phone call from the landlord and never did anything where they said, no, I'm not going to take that payment plan, or I'm not going to give you that information. If it was just a miscommunication between the landlord and the tenant, that wouldn't be willful. But if the tenant says, no, I will not give you my information, or I'm not going to give you my social security number, or whatever is needed, then that would be willful.
Willful. All right. Senator Bell, does that respond to your issue?
It does partially. If I can ask another question, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
If council could respond, the effect to that segment of the bill if the word willfully was deleted?
If it were deleted, one moment. Hold on.
If it read the tenant has refused versus willfully refused, because it seems like we're setting a very high bar there.
Yeah, then it would be refused seems to have some willful component in and of itself. So willfully refused might be somewhat redundant. So if it was just the tenant has refused, you would still need the tenant refusing actively. So that wouldn't, I don't know how much it would change it. The court would have to interpret that, but yeah. Does that make sense?
Senator Bell, is there any further action or follow-up you want?
I'll hold off for now, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Okay. Senator Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask counsel. On line 19, we put the onus on the landlord. The landlord has taken all steps necessary to apply for the financial assistance available through the programs. Secretary Navarro suggested we should get council's advice on, can the landlord do that? I would guess maybe we're setting up the state program to do so, but can you confirm that? And can the landlord apply for a federal program on behalf of the tenant to get the money themselves?
As I would read it, if it's available now for the landlord to apply, then they would have to go through that application process. If it's not available, then I don't know that the landlord would be held to the standard of having to apply to something that doesn't exist. Does that make sense? So to the degree that it exists, an application process for the rent and mortgage relief program currently, then the landlord would have to go through that process, or in 4 months, right?
All right. Senator Mason.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll try one more time and I'll stop. I'm sorry, sir. I think I'm maybe not answering the question correctly. Can the landlord apply for the programs that exist today? I was under the impression the tenant would have to apply for relief themselves to be paid for the landlord. Can the landlord do that on behalf of the tenant?
Yeah, I am not appraised of the current application process under the rent and mortgage relief program, so I can't speak to whether it's the landlord or the tenant or either or both. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
Senator Evan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to point out for Senator Mason and the rest of the committee, I was just reading ahead to line 22, and it says, if the landlord is not eligible to apply for the RMRP, he's assisted the tenant in completing the application or any application. So even if the landlord can't apply for it, it's still contemplated in the bill. I don't know if that answers your concern at all.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, we move to public testimony then, and hopefully, again, should be able to hopefully get through this in less than 10 minutes. So if you want to get people ready to comment on Senate Bill 5051, starting with Kevin Shiflett.
Kevin, you're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Shiflett, and I'm a private rental owner offering safe, clean housing here in the Commonwealth. I'd like to speak in opposition to this bill and in favor of any bill that offers fair and narrowly defined legislation that addresses evictions during these times. No one disputes the need to protect folks who suffer through a legitimate COVID-related financial issue, especially when it leads to the possibility of widespread homelessness. So that would obviously not be good for anybody. However, in writing a bill so broadly to exclude all evictions except a narrow, just that one exception of the commission of a willful or criminal act, by doing that, the government is forcing housing providers to suffer through, the experimental discovery of all the things that this committee could not possibly predict at this time. And I'll give you some examples here in a moment, but I'd like to say that, snap decision laws like this that seriously affect people's businesses and then contradict other laws that are already on the books that have been well thought out. They always have second and third order effects, and many landlords this past spring and summer have discovered those effects. So this is the purpose of writing narrowly focused bills. I'd ask that the law be written to preclude only those situations where a tenant can show a legitimate COVID-related financial issue to a court. If this situation exists, then the court would halt that eviction, and rightly so. And since that law would be well known amongst landlords, you wouldn't see the evictions going forward because landlords would know that this is COVID affected and it's financially related. It won't go anywhere. So for that maybe 1-2% that actually go to court, a judge is there to say, hey, this is not related to COVID financial hardship. So I'm advocating for or against a blanket law that prevents all evictions and that also create kind of a sense of an impunity amongst some tenants. Definitely not all, not the majority. But some, and it goes to the two examples I'd like to share with you. So setting the stage, as I said, I'm a housing provider. I've offered housing to single family housing to Section 8 tenants and non-Section 8 tenants. It's about a 40-60 split for the past decade. So that's well before the July 1st date of this year where it became required that landlords do it. So I've been doing it for a while. Recently had a Section 8 tenant who simply refused to complete their annual paperwork with Section 8. Had nothing to do with me at all. It was between Section 8 and the tenant. The tenant refused to do it. They just didn't want to because they knew they couldn't get evicted. Consequently, HUD dropped them from their program. So I'm it's a musical chair game. I have no chair to sit in at that time, and I'm the one with a tenant who won't pay, and HUD has dropped them, and I can't evict them. At that time, as of now, we're about 4 months behind with rent on that. Had nothing to do with COVID, and but they just kind of rode the coattails in of the legislation and the judicial actions that were rightly put in place to protect people who faced COVID issues. Incident number 2, another tenant, Section 8, moved in a third-party resident in violation of my lease, but more importantly, HUD rules. With that, HUD kicked them off the program. Now, folks are still living in the home and not paying rent, and nor is HUD. So I've mentioned 2 examples. Both coincidentally happen to be Section 8 tenants, but I could give you, if we had more time, I could give you other examples. Non-Section 8 tenants smoking in the home now, against the lease, but knowing they can't be evicted, or during certain times, the court wouldn't even take the paperwork for evictions. So, and then one other thing I'd like to say, I heard a lot of discussion about the word willful, and as written, not that this would be the only remedy to this bill, which I hope does not pass, but with the word willful, a willful act that is not remediable, which is what the language is, that's often an arguable standard anyway. So not only does it put the burden on us to prove it, it becomes a debate. Full stop, turn the page. I'd like to say one more thing before I give up the mic. You guys were speaking about the whether or not landlords could apply for the housing, the Virginia Rent and Mortgage Relief Program. I have a form right here, if you can see it, that I just filled out today, as a matter of fact. And I was not able to initiate that as a landlord. The tenant had to do it. And the bottom line in the paper, and again, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but it has a section for the tenant to sign. And if the tenant can't sign, then they have to give verbal consent. So again, I'm not sure who's saying that landlords can initiate this themselves, but that's not been my experience. And again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Asif Bhavnagri.
They are no longer on the call, Senator.
All right, Elaine Poon.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Elaine Poon, and I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Justice Center, and I'm speaking in support of this substitute bill. I think it's not a secret that our priority at Legal Aid Justice Center during this pandemic and always is that everyone in Virginia stay safely housed, no matter what their financial circumstances are. The risk right now of mass homelessness in this health crisis is dire, and it affects all of us. Providing these tenant protections is the safe thing to do for our communities. Evictions are expensive. Senator Hashmi just mentioned it. They are expensive for the community, but they're also expensive for landlords. So this bill is the logical thing to do. This substitute is linked to that RMRP program. And there are a lot of questions that I heard about the RMRP. I sit on the committee that advises the local disbursement of the funds in our area. And yes, the paperwork sometimes does say, the tenants can apply, but our programs here have been reaching out even to landlords and reaching out to courts. And so they will work with landlords if they are the ones who apply. This bill provides that scaffolding that RMRP needs to reach its full operational capacity. I see them struggling locally. They need time to educate landlords. They need time to get to, full staffing, to process claims. We just need to give this relief time and a chance to allow the program to work and for tenants not to fall through the cracks in the meantime. We just heard that there are conversations happening at the governor's office and in the House to try to find the right vehicle for us to collectively reach that goal of keeping Virginians housed. I've heard a lot of you all talk about how that's not what I want. I don't want to evict anyone. And I think that we can work collectively towards that, but we cannot continue as we are. There was just a mention of the possibility of having people prove COVID-related reasons in court. Our organization represents all of those tenants in that courthouse. Those courthouses are a dangerous situation right now. 2 courthouses this month have closed because of COVID. There were hundreds of cases on the docket every single week. There were hallways that were crowded with people waiting to hear what was going to happen with them in their evictions.
All right, can you finish up real quickly?
Sorry?
Could you finish very quickly?
Okay, I just support this bill and I appreciate you considering it. Thank you.
All right, Hiwat Barahan. Berihun.
They're off the line, Senator.
All right. Kenneth Gilliam.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barker and also members of the committee. My name is Kenneth Gilliam, and I serve as a policy director for New Virginia Majority, and we fully support this bill. First, want to begin my comments by thanking Senator Hashmi for putting in this critical piece of legislation that we know will, one, address the eviction issues that we're seeing across Virginia, but also the nation. But as an organization, we also see this bill as an opportunity to continue to advance racial equity in our Commonwealth. And so just as context, we know before the recession and also COVID-19, Black and Latinx households were already more likely to be renters. And not only were they more likely to be renters, they were more likely to be low-income renters compared to white households. And now this did not happen by happenstance. This is as a direct result of decades of racial discrimination in real estate, lending practices, housing policies, as well as other barriers that have impacted their economic opportunities. And so now, as we are in the midst of COVID-19 and the economic recession, this bill, particularly around the eviction moratorium, is critically important because we have seen clear examples here in Virginia of how lifting eviction moratoriums and allowing those proceedings to go forward has directly impacted communities of color. And so, for example, here in Richmond, 5 out of the 6 neighborhoods with the highest number of eviction cases pending when the moratorium was initially lifted in June were neighborhoods where the majority of those residents were Black or Latinx. And it is very crystal clear from the COVID-19 data across the country in Virginia that the COVID-19 pandemic has also disproportionately impacted communities of color. And so allowing evictions to move forward in a time where access to housing is so crucial to preventing the spread of COVID-19, this places the residents in those neighborhoods, in the communities that we serve, at even higher risk. And so for our organization, this is a key priority for our organization because of our members who are mostly low-income people throughout the Commonwealth. And in this moment, I think of members like one of our members in Norfolk, Virginia, who is a mother of 4 beautiful children.
Can you try
and
to
during
finish
this
up quickly?
crisis, she has lost her job, has fallen 2 months behind on rent as a result, and she has also been affected by COVID-19. And so if staying in our homes is vital to mitigating the spread of COVID-19, then we need to keep people safely in their homes because this is the issue that impacts all of us. And so for those reasons, New Virginia Majority, we strongly support this bill.
Thank you. Next is Darahay Mengisha.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Darahay Mengisha. I live in Southern Tower, Alexandria, Virginia. I have 2 children and a wife. So I support the eviction moratorium until April 30, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Bizuna Juma.
You're in the room. You need to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bizuna Juma. I'm living in Southern Tower, and I'm living with my mom. She's older, Rimam. She's sick, and I support her. And since March, I lost my job. I'm working in Marriott Hotel, and I am very desperate finding a job, but I couldn't find. So I'm behind by rent, and I cannot afford to pay my rent. Right now, I'm very frustrated because the coming September is my second appointment for the court. So I'm support the eviction moratorium until April 13, 2011. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Koziol.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Brian Koziel. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Housing Alliance. And we work to increase access to affordable housing and homelessness across the Commonwealth. Our membership represents organizations from across the state that are on the front lines of delivering affordable housing and services to tenants. And as you all are keenly aware, evictions were a critically important priority for the Commonwealth before the pandemic, and even more so today. As of now, we are taking a neutral approach. There was, I think, the first time ever we were allowed to do that in the registration to speak. We are incredibly pleased to see the progress on the bills today that help support protections for tenants that so they don't lose access to their homes during the pandemic, but also provide resources to support landlords who are providing safe, quality housing so they can continue to meet their financial obligations. And we hope that this committee and the General Assembly as a whole can work together to find viable ways to protect tenants who have lost income while also helping landlords to meet their obligations. VHA is more than willing to and ready to work with you on solutions to towards these important housing goals. Thank you.
Vicky Perkins.
They've dropped off the call, Senator.
All right. Steve Pardon.
Good afternoon, committee members. I had a lot of nice words prepared for you, but of course it was prepared based on what I had read yesterday. So we're going to wing this real quick on the fly. And while there is some improvement in the way the bill has been changed, there's still one major issue, and that is the fact that I understand we're all talking about payment. Landlords work with tenants who can't pay all of the time. This bill puts a moratorium. We are against this bill, by the way, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that I'm the president of the National Association of Residential Property Managers for the state of Virginia, NARPM. And this bill, consistently across the board, it doesn't deal with end of lease. It is saying the only way you could do an eviction is if it is health and human safety. We currently have a tenant in our own office who has been in there since June, who just doesn't want to find a new place and doesn't have to because we can't go through the eviction process. Even with the changes that are in this bill, the main issue that we have with this bill is one side punitive. It is negating a contractual obligation that two citizens of the Commonwealth entered into willfully. We understand that people need help, and at NARPM, we fully support any kind of assistance that can be given to tenants, any kind of financial assistance. But a moratorium or extending the amount of time they are there just builds a tenant's debt when they are in that debt. It doesn't do anything to help that debt. Whatever you end up doing, as we oppose this bill, however it gets changed, we're asking you to fashion a bill that is not one side punitive and is instead some sort of assistance that's beneficial for all. And I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. Andrew Clark.
They've dropped off, Senator.
Okay, Gabrielle Duval.
Afternoon. Thank you, Chairman and committee members. My name is Gabrielle Duval, and I'm with Southern Management Corporation. Southern provides workforce housing in Virginia. Through our Virginia companies, our Virginia communities, we provide apartment homes to almost 10,000 residents, and this is workforce housing. First, let me state that I fully support and endorse the comments of Kevin Shiflett and Mr. Pardon, and I would do that to save time of me repeating myself. My biggest concern with the bill as drafted and in its current state is the correlation to the RMRP. And in order to correlate a bill so strongly to the RMRP, there needs to be a fuller understanding and a more fully fleshed out interpretation of what the RMRP means. The RMRP requires a landlord to execute a contract with its resident, and that it goes beyond our lease. It is forcing us into a separate contractual obligation with our tenant. That states that we will forego 50% of 3 months' rent. That is not providing landlord relief. That is not what everyone's been talking about today. When you talk about $50 million there and landlords will be made whole, that is absolutely not the case under the existing RMRP. Additionally, the RMRP does not allow landlords to apply. So this bill, as drafted, puts incredibly onerous provisions on the landlord, asking us to almost step into the shoes of the Department of Housing or Social Services with the level that it requires us to communicate and advocate on behalf of the RMRP and payment plans to our residents. We are already and had voluntarily pre-COVID been putting forth payment plans to our residents. The residents don't want them and don't avail themselves of them. In our Bayview community in Woodbridge, Virginia, where we have 673 units, we are operating at an 18% delinquency, yet only 63 residents have availed themselves of our payment plans, which are readily available. That number shows you the problem is not coming from the landlord, it is coming from the tenants. Better tenant, robust education, explaining that an eviction moratorium will still mean that they owe this money at the end of time, is necessary before any moratorium should be extended. If a tenant owes $1,600 a month in rent, and under this bill, they're foregone rent for 12 months before anyone can evict them, they are going to wind up owing at the lifting of the moratorium $19,200. That is not a hole we should be digging for the tenants in Virginia. And while we care deeply about the community and we are working with our residents, we're not in the business of evictions, but nor can you ignore the fact that housing is a business. And we have essential workers, and we're providing in Virginia, since the advent of COVID, we've spent $130,000 on PPE and protective equipment for our team members who show up to work every day in Virginia to ensure that residents who are sheltering in place have safe and clean places to call home. We've also lost tremendously. In Virginia, our collections are down $400,000 the period from March to July 2020. That is compared to last year's performance. We're also losing the ability to collect late fees and further incentivize prompt payment from those who can pay, not those who can't. And additionally, our business still has to go on. We have mortgage payments, we have substantial tax obligations, insurance costs, and payroll. No one is asking other essential workers, like grocery stores, to stop providing inventory for free. So why should landlords have to bear this burden alone?
Can you try to finish up now, please?
And I would just end by saying that at some point, we have to look at what's fair and right. And restricting the non-monetary evictions is even scarier. Telling us that we can't evict unless we meet the very high burden of showing willful or criminal conduct is akin to telling us it's the most stringent and goes beyond any just cause legislation, and basically says that we can't evict a resident who potentially causes harm or danger to our community. We would ask that this bill be rethought, some more time spent on it, so a harder look at the RMRP. We are not opposed to a bill that protects residents and tenants in Virginia. We are opposed to this bill as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler Craddock.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tyler Craddock again on behalf of Manufactured Housing Communities of Virginia. We came in prepared just to completely oppose the bill because we, like others had read it as proposed. We still are not in support of this bill, and there are a couple of things I think that bear pointing out. I think as Mr. Pardon pointed out, a couple of people before me, you're put into a situation where you have to go through all these steps for evictions that do not involve the non-payment of rent. There are plenty of other types of reasons that a lease has to be terminated. And the one I constantly hear from property managers of all types on is what's called a holdover tenant. The lease ends, tenant doesn't, and the tenant's been notified that the lease is not being renewed. Tenant wants to stay. Normally that involves a court action, but you're putting these other things in place. The other thing I would point out is, some of these, there may be some difficulty in the way this is drafted in being able to completely check the box on all these. For example, I would direct the committee's attention to lines 25 through 27. Landlord has taken all steps necessary to apply for any other rental assistance or financial assistance that could assist with the paying of past due rent. That's a pretty broad range of every possible thing that's out there, because what if there's this one program in a community, say privately funded through a charity, that you miss, right? You don't check that box. And again, I would voice the same concerns that have been voiced about the idea of willfully refuse to attempt and again, I'm just seeing this language as the sub came out earlier, so I haven't had a chance to bounce it off of any of our attorneys. But in lines 31 and 32, that would seem to be that, a tenant could almost just, refuse to communicate with a landlord,
right.
But there's no willful, refusal to negotiate a payment plan, no willful refusal. It's just, because we hear that all the time with property managers who get into situations where the communication breaks down. So I think those are some of the things that really need to be thought through on this. Certainly, as in the real estate industry, our folks have worked with tenants on all sorts of payment plans, and we would still go back to our original sort of position, which is this: the most effective means of helping tenants is rental assistance, a good, robust system of rental assistance. Eviction moratoria don't do anything to help the tenants except they cause them to build debt, and potentially they destroy income streams, especially for small property owners. And those are income streams that pay for, taxes, pays for maintenance, pays for mortgages.
Tyler, can you try to finish up, please?
Yes, sir. And as with that, I'll finish up, and I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Luis Aguilar.
Good afternoon, members of the committee and chairman of the committee. I'm Luis Aguilar, Casas Virginia Director, and today I speak on behalf of our 10,000 members. In Richmond alone, this weekend, there was a rise over 2,583 COVID-19 cases. There have been a total of 109,000 cases across the Commonwealth. Do we leave these Virginians to their own destiny, or do we provide eviction protections that all Virginians deserve? 34.8% of those cases are by Latinos, 32.1% are by white people, 25.3% are by Black people. COVID-19 does not discriminate by race. It is clear that it is most economically disadvantaged, the ones that are suffering the most. Here's the story of one of our members, Dennis Torres of Annandale, Virginia. Dennis lives in Annandale with his wife and daughter. After losing his job this April due to the pandemic, he fell behind on his rent. In July, his landlord initiated eviction proceedings and took him to court. He was lucky that the judge gave him the opportunity to pay to stay, and friends, family, and neighbors came to the family's aid to loan them enough to escape eviction at that time. In mid-August, he was lucky enough to start working again, but he is wondering what he will do when his rent is due in September. With only a couple weeks of income, he will again be forced to decide whether to buy food and necessities for his family, pay his rent, or pay back all of the friends who loaned the money to prevent eviction in July. This is one of the thousands of stories, just like the 6,000 court cases on evictions currently suspended until September 7th. Like Dennis and like you all, none of us planned to be ready for a pandemic, but here we are. Yet, most of us have in this body and as advocates have a responsibility to strategically confront this pandemic. There's absolutely no time for partisanship. We have lost enough time already. Remember, this pandemic has hit the working class and working people all across the Commonwealth the most. We as an organization, you as representatives, we have responsibilities to the people in Virginia, and we ask the committee to fully support Virginians and give them breathing room until April 2021 and advance SB 5051, sponsored by Senator Hashmi. Thank you.
All right, Tina Guyton.
They've dropped off the call, Senator.
Dropped off?
But we do have one other.
Okay.
We have Aaron Barton.
Aaron Barton.
I believe actually Chip Dix is going to speak for the realtors, so I'll defer to him. I see him waiting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right.
Chairman of the committee, Chip Dix on behalf of the realtors, and I've asked him to speak on the behalf of the home builders and also the Northern Virginia Apartment Association. First of all, thank you for Senator Hashmi for trying to work on the substitute and get it into a better form. I don't read the language of the substitute, though, as being tied to the COVID emergency. So I'm not sure that the bill in its current posture would be within the scope scope of the procedural resolution for this session. Second thing is, as has been previously stated, with respect to the rental assistance program at DHCD, the challenge there is that the current structure is only the tenant can apply, and tenants that are only at 50% or 80% of area median income, the AMI, and many of those tenants don't have the resources and the understanding to be able to apply for those funds themselves. And as a result of which, the DHCD program hasn't processed many applications to this point. There is a landlord program being evaluated where the landlords, through their resident managers and through property managers, realtor property managers, would be able to help tenants fill out these forms and be able to submit them on behalf of the tenants. But that is in a beta test stage, and that is not currently in process. And as previously stated also with respect to that rental assistance program, it does require that the landlord, is called a landlord 50-50 program, that the landlord can get no more than 3 months rent, and they have to write off 3 months rent. And then the landlord would get a 4th month rent payment. So in the month that the landlord received that rent money, then the tenant would not be evicted. So there is a substantial gap where many landlords are concerned about whether or not they want to participate in the program and write off half their back rent. This also, the current draft of legislation eliminates the ability to deal with tenant problems with respect to 2130 violations, social violations, those type things that don't rise to a willful criminal level. It also eliminates the 30-day repeat provisions in there that have been standard law since really 1974 when the Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act was passed. This is also a very tough policy for property owners when you consider that you're not able to collect rent, and the proposal here is until the end of April of next year, so that's 8 months. And you've talked about many landlords who don't get rent money for 8 months are going to be in default of their mortgages, and this will have a substantial ripple effect with respect to a moratorium. I would say, though, in closing, that housing providers are in the business of providing housing because they care about people, and they're not interested and don't want to evict people. But there has to be the right public policy balance that's struck where tenants that are able to pay rent should be paying the rent. And currently, I would suggest to you that the language of the substitute does not even include a means test. So I could be somebody that earns several $100,000 a year and have $8,000 a month worth of rent, and I could go into this program. There's nothing that prevents me from having myself and my property not be able to evict me for this 8-month period. So with all due respect to the substitute, and I know we've just had a day in session so far, actually 2 days counting today, this bill still needs a lot of work, and there's a lot of concerns on the housing provider side of just the fundamental policy. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
All right, thank you. That completes the public testimony.
Mr. Chairman?
We have, yes, Senator Hashmi.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I've been texting back and forth with Christy Mara from the Virginia Poverty Law Center. She said she has been in queue ever since Senator Eben and Senator Bell's bill, but she seems not to be allowed into the room. Can we check on that technical issue, if possible?
Well, it wasn't a technical issue. We had her listed down here for actually Senator Locke's bill rather than the other two. But I'll call on her, Christy Mara, now to address Senate Bill 5051.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Senator Ghazala, for both working so hard on this legislation and for making sure I get an opportunity to speak in support of it. And we've heard a lot of testimony over the past however many minutes it's been about the details of this legislation. And I want to reiterate that, in fact, this substitute is a vehicle for continued conversations about the best way to move forward to protect both tenants and landlords. And I know that my friend, Mr. Dix, just said that this bill is not ready, but I have to remind everyone that we do not have time to put this issue of whether or not to protect tenants in the middle of a pandemic where the best way to stay safe and to keep your neighbors and family safe is to stay inside as much as possible and use good hygiene as much as possible. We don't have time to work out the details over a period of months. This is an urgent matter. And I just want to give you one illustration of how urgent it is. Since the end of the judicial eviction moratorium on June 29th, over 20,000 eviction cases have been heard in this state, and over 4,000 families have been put out of their homes. And I know that Senator Ghazala started off today this particular bill by talking about, among other things, the impact on children and the impact on education. And we don't have to speculate about what the impact on those children will be, those children in those 4,000 families will be of not having a home. It will be more dire now than it's ever been before. It will be potentially threatening not only their education, because with schools closed and everyone learning at home, it will be impossible for those children not to fall far behind their peers. But also the risk to their health and the risk to their parents' health, the risk to the health of others they come in contact with. The details that have been discussed, whether a landlord can apply directly, how long it takes to go through the process, what the barriers or burdens should be and who they should be placed on, can be worked out as we move through this process. But the important thing is to have a vehicle and have a moratorium to protect tenants. If we had had a moratorium since June 29th, those 4,000 families would still be housed. And if this bill had been in place then, because the rent and mortgage relief program was in place then, there would have been more of an incentive for their landlords to work with them to make sure that the money got to the landlords. There is, as we've heard, almost $50 million left in the state rent and mortgage relief program. And there are a number of jurisdictions, including the city of Richmond and others, that also have received funding for themselves, for the localities, and some of them have decided to also use some of that funding for rent and mortgage relief. And there are other sources as well. If we want people to stay safe, if we want children to be able to learn, and if we want landlords to stay whole during this pandemic, you should pass this bill on to the floor. We can work out all the details as it moves through the process. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Given that I let one person in who wasn't signed up for speaking in favor, I'm going to call on Brian Gordon to speak for those who were not signed up but wanted to speak to this bill in opposition. So Brian, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I will be very brief in my comments. I'm representing the Virginia Apartment and Management Association and the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. Our member companies own and manage a collective portfolio of roughly 393,000 multifamily residential units throughout the Commonwealth. Again, I had much more extensive comments prepared, but I don't want to intrude upon your time. I will simply note, as Mr. Dix just elaborated upon very eloquently, there are no assurances in this bill or in the governor's language that housing providers will be made even remotely whole at the expiration of the moratorium. In fact, the guidelines of the rent and mortgage relief program specifically stipulate that a housing provider must forgive an equal number of months' rent as assistance they receive, or accept only a single month's rent with no ability to recover possession for failure to make those payments. But perhaps more to the point, tenants will still face eviction at the expiration of the moratorium, and they'll additionally be saddled with heftier financial judgments as they continue to accrue debt over the duration of the moratorium. We believe that legislative efforts are better focused on getting real assistance into the hands of struggling renters to address the underlying problem rather than simply kicking the can down the road. So please vote no on SB 5051. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we've completed the public testimony part. We got almost 40 minutes of testimony. There's a substantial amount of testimony that's there. What I will say is now we'll open it back up to the committee for action on things. I have not gotten, because of the limitations that we have right now, I've not gotten a specific request from the Chair of the Finance and Appropriations for re-referral if there's a positive disposition of this. But given that there's language in the budget that deals with specifically with this issue, it seems to me that if we're going to report the bill out of the committee, it needs to be reported and re-referred to Finance and Appropriations. Senator McPike, did you want to weigh in on things, or?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think that all the members are very much interested in figuring out a solution to the various eviction and issues that are occurring across the Commonwealth due to COVID. It seems that there are still quite a few technical issues associated with the bill. I'm wondering if there's subsequent general laws, if this bill can be passed by for the day, that it be taken up and then re-refer to Finance subsequently. I think there's enough substantive mechanisms and issues that need to be worked out before it passes out of the committee, before Finance, if that makes sense, Mr. Chairman.
That certainly can be done because, as I said at the beginning, we had 12 bills and we put only 4 on the calendar today because we wanted to deal substantively with these and give people an opportunity to speak to both the pluses and minuses on this, so that it certainly would be possible. I certainly expect that there will be a second meeting of the General Laws and Technology Committee, so that could be there could be action taken to pass it by for the day if you wished.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Senator Donovan, I just wanted to say that I think that Senator McPike is correct. We all genuinely want to make sure that people have safe housing, and that's been exacerbated by COVID. But there must be a balance in the solution, as was mentioned by some of our speakers. And we cannot destroy an individual's ability to maintain their business by mandating. I really think the mandate is the problem here. If there was solutions, this is the perfect place for COVID relief funds. I don't understand why, if this is such a large priority, we aren't making sure. The state is basically, by mandating, it's passing off its responsibility and the onerous to fix this to individual owners. It's simply not what we should be doing here, especially when we know and we've all seen how the business community and rent owners, owners of property, have done such an amazing job to solve this problem without a mandate. So we really need to find a solution that addresses the costs here and is a balance for both the owners of the property that have to meet their mortgages and the renters, but mandating that they can't evict is not the solution unless there's funding to cover the rent costs. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or any motion that anyone wants to make?
I move that we pass it by for the day.
Second.
All right. There's a motion to pass by for the day with a second to that. Is there any discussion on that motion? All right, all in favor of passing by for the day, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. All right, we will pass by for the day, and I will hold in abeyance Senator Locke's Senate Bill 5089. As I said, we did take about 40 minutes of testimony, and we now are an hour and a quarter past the originally planned starting time for the Commerce and Labor Committee. And this will give us an opportunity to allow that to get going here shortly. So unless there's anything else, we will adjourn the meeting of the General Laws and Technology Committee for the day, and we'll let you know when we're going to reconvene.